Hello, everyone, and welcome to Know Your Shit podcast, where our knowledge and pride in what we do drives us to be excellent. My name is Josh Cadillac, and I'll be in the driver's seat for today's show as we learn how to stop doing deals and start closing for life. And we do this by talking to the most successful experts in their field to see how they built their businesses. We have a great show for you today because we have a great guest, Mr. Steve Scanlon. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be on your show, Josh. It really is. I've looked a little bit at your show, and it looks like you've got a great audience, a great curriculum and content that you do, and so I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Steve, why don't you tell everybody what it is you do?
Oh, wow. Usually I take that question. I'm like, I suspect you mean vocationally, but here we go. I do a lot of things. I like to cook. I paint. But that's not what your listeners want to know. I am the CEO of Rewire Inc. We are effectively a mindset coaching company. We have about 18 or so coaches across the country. I've been an executive coach and a leadership coach for the better part of 25 years. And really about, 10 years into my first gig, I started to have a different understanding of what I perceived created genuine transformation in people.
Okay.
And so that was of interest to me as a coach. You want to see people win, have results, have success, take actions, and all of those things. And really for the first few years, it wasn't that we weren't seeing it. I got real interested in maybe a deeper understanding of what caused change, because a lot of people want to improve, Josh. I mean, all your listeners are like, everyone you speak to, all the events that you do, people are coming because they're at X and they want to go to Y or Z or whatever.
Sure. I want to move the needle.
We won't typically go to those places unless we change. Growth is change. And as it turns out, the human brain doesn't maybe do change very well. So we actually have to learn what it is that creates that change. And I got into that, and I've spent the better part of the last, call it, decade or so, deeply steeped in neuroscience, a specific element of neuroscience called plasticity, which is truly how the human brain changes itself.
Sure.
As a result of outside influence. But I love neurochemistry. I love neurobiology, and we try to do our best to bring those things to bear as we work with people. Because in my company, we have a saying: if you can't help someone think differently, you probably won't help them act differently.
Yeah. No, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's going to start up with the old noggin. Got to get that dialed in. So, what really got you started down that road, Steve? I mean, why this? It seems like an unusual place.
You mean the road of coaching or the road of neuroscience? What road?
The road of kind of bridging neuroscience and coaching together like this. Like, what brought that marriage together?
Again, the coaching I did initially was very. These days, there's a difference between maybe mindset coaching and technical coaching. Or adaptive based coaching. And so if you're coaching someone and it's a series of do this, and telling people to do things so that they can get a result, I did that for a decade. And it wasn't that we didn't get results. The primary thing that I observed was that the results were, if you're telling someone what to do, and we go to these events and people like, you should get into your database or do social like this or whatever. And we get told what to do. If you tell someone what to do, I'll give you a quick little bit of neuroscience. In coaching, if you tell someone what to do, let's say I give you, Josh, good advice, and you come to me and go, hey, Steve, that was great advice or good advice, whatever. Well, two things happen if I give you good advice. One, I get a dopamine hit. Look at me and my good advice.
I'm awesome. Yep.
And the second thing is actually I rob you of a needed neural pathway, because today, through brain scans and fMRI and different ways that we understand the human brain, believe it or not, if I can get you to go, man, you know what I should do? If you have an epiphany, if a light turns on for you, or I've had some of my clients use the language, well, it really dawned on me, which I really like that metaphor, right?
Yeah.
From dark to light. But when you create that internally, we now can actually isolate neural pathways. And that neural pathway that you create that came from you, number one, lasts a lot longer in your brain and therefore gives you a greater ability to take action on your own thing. So that's what
Sure.
I saw that before I even knew the neuroscience. In other words, I tell people what to do. Yeah. And so I always ask people, if you've got kids or, frankly, friends or whatever, if you tell someone what to do, have you ever been frustrated that you're telling them again? Like, I already told you to do that.
Yeah.
So as it turns out, and so you asked a question, what got me down that road is, frankly, I was exacerbated with the idea that I wasn't seeing change happen in the long term. I was seeing it in the short term. People can leave your events like, I'm fired up, and they might go act. Well, how many people are going to resort back to what they were doing on Monday? And that's a very common occurrence. And that ate at my brain until I was like, I need to start studying something else. And frankly, the first kind of field I got into, Josh, was really the field of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Which is a broad field that basically explains the fact that your limbic system, the part of your brain where you emote primarily of emotions, is much more powerful than the logic center of your brain. So that I started taking courses and classes at UCLA and other places in emotional intelligence. And then I've got some certifications and stuff now in interpersonal neurobiology, partly because I just got fascinated by the human brain and how it works. And really how it works as it pertains to positive change. And I have to point that out because sometimes I'll have people in some of the classes that I teach come up to me and go, oh, my son's got Asperger's or this or that. Right. And like, it's not that I don't understand maybe a little bit about the pathology, but my gearing is more towards helping some of like people like your people, like how do we get from X to Y in a positive way? And how can we use neurochemistry and biology and understanding how the brain works to help us get there? And
Sure.
I'm so passionate about it. I can't.
I hear you.
Can't stop.
And so I want to kind of go back to what you said about the emotional part being more powerful than the logical part. I mean, because I know, like as kids, it's very much learning that kids have emotions and they react to them immediately, and the learning to kind of put that off, like hey, look, you can't do that right now. You have to, and so the development, I think, of the logical side seems to like come along later, and it's kind of the learning process of when it's okay and how. And so I could totally see what you're saying, that the emotional side seems to be like developed, up and running, good to go, and the logical is kind of like playing catch up a little bit. And how you feel. I mean, so much of how you feel, and even how you let yourself feel, dictates how you're going to do something, I suppose.
Well, yeah, like you, I'm sure maybe even today, I don't know what you were talking about, but today in your talks, but clearly this thing going on in real estate with this new legislation and whatever, when you look at people's response to that, and it's like this huge deal and whatever. I thought I saw something that you did. You were like, folks, it's really not changing that much, right? Meaning how we observe it. But watching people respond emotionally to this new law
Totally.
is so interesting, but that will dictate more of their actions. And to your point, it's largely understood that the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that uses logic, language, reason, higher level functioning and stuff, it's not developed. Well, in males, it's typically 26 years old. And
perfect.
Females beat us by a year. It's usually 25. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a prefrontal cortex. It's just not fully developed, which is exactly why dedicating energy and time to teach a 15-year-old about emotional intelligence is a fool's errand.
Uphill battle.
Or there's a way to do it. You just have to. You can't appeal to all the logic, because they literally don't most of the time have the developed brain that can understand it.
Right. They don't have the hardware there to take in the inputs. So what do you think you like best about doing this, Steve?
What do I like best about doing it? Truly, when you do see that kind of change, when I get to be a part of a genuine transformation in somebody, a client that was always responding in a certain way. I coach a lot of CEOs and leaders. I had one leader that was like, when I get, mad and I'm triggered, and this is how I respond. And we've just been working and practicing on metacognition. And, this guy called me a couple months ago and said he had this big deal blowing up on him in California, and he gave me all the facts, and he was like, you know what? I stepped back. I wrote an email. It was the first time ever I read it. I breathed like you taught me, and I therefore chose to not send the email. He goes, I think it saved me about $9 million. Now that's hard money. And I don't know. He was like, what I would have created in that. And he is like, this is worth its weight in gold. So
Yep.
that's an example. But when I see people manifest that kind of change in relationships, in their business, that's my big win.
No, I get that. So kind of the coach of the coach sort of question. You coaching yourself up and kind of assessing what it is that you have to work with. I'm a big believer in if you're going to be a good boss to yourself, you got to take a kind of pop yourself out of yourself, take a look down at yourself and say, all right, what the hell are we working with here? Right. So what do you think in your makeup is what makes you good at this thing you've chosen to do?
Well, I guess I would can I ask you a question about your question?
Sure.
When you say my makeup, maybe I could help. I don't, I guess, know exactly how to answer that. When you say my makeup, what is it about me personally? What is it about my experiences?
I would
Help
say
me. Makeup is like, are you going to get into a nature nurture conversation with me? Like, what do you help me understand what you mean so I can answer effectively?
Everybody's kind of got their strengths and weaknesses they kind of come from the factory with. So if you want to say nature nurture, I'm saying it's kind of the things that are easier for you to do that are maybe harder for other people. Some people that is, I'm just super obsessive compulsive about this. Some people, I have to constantly ask, why. I fight the status quo. These are the kind of answers that I've gotten. What are the things that make you kind of the way you are that you think that plays into creating the curiosity where it is, and all the things that come from putting together what you have?
I think it's a very rich question. I suppose I could answer that two ways. The first would be, because we're doing this show, I'm going to give you an off the cuff answer. That's the kind of thing that I might have to call you in 24 hours and give you one that it would cause me to think about that. I think the first thing that came to my head, and you said the word, I might have developed and curated a sort of different sense of curiosity. And I may have already had some of that, but I'm intensely curious.
Mm.
Not only about the things out into the world, but also to your point, like today, I'm driving down the road and I'm having these thoughts, and I have, I get coached too, but I've been developing this thought of being curious about my own thinking. Wow, why
Mm.
do I think that? Rather than presume that everything that I think is
Yeah,
correct.
totally. You
Right.
know what? I have totally been let down by what's going on up here at times. So I've learned to filter, should I even be thinking about this? Yeah, and where the hell did that come from? No, I totally agree. I think and this is something that I've spoken a lot about. There is this place for realizing there's a little bit of schizophrenia in being a human being, in that there are these conversations that go on with us. Most of the ones that I talk about usually revolve around whether or not I should eat the Oreos. And, the little voice in my head that's saying, well, it's not cheat day, Josh. You can't have the Oreos. And you have the little voice that says, yeah, but you did extra cardio and you're down a couple pounds, and Oreos are delicious, and you're going to have just one. That conversation where you lie to yourself and all that, the other stuff. And then next thing you know, you're sitting there 45 minutes later, covered in chocolate dust and shame. There's almost no Oreos left in the package. You're wondering how you got here again. That negotiation with ourselves is just another facet, I think, of kind of that idea of, taking captive the fact that just because it occurs to you, just because it's in your mind, it doesn't mean it's the best thing. Like, overall, we kind of need to have an adult filter, if you will, for ourselves, because
Well,
I
there's a
don't
little
know.
bit of a trick to that. I mean, I, again, don't know where you want to take that, but I can
Sure.
offer your listeners, call it
Sure.
a little bit of a hack with what I'm going to take the analogy that you gave and give a little I don't know, maybe we'll call it a brain hack. There's a way to do that that's maybe not as intuitive as people think.
Okay.
So if you're sitting around going, man, I'd really like an Oreo. And then you have an inner dialogue of, these aren't good for you or
Uh,
me, right? Because it depends on if you're using the first or second person, right? These aren't good for me. Sometimes we say
mhm.
these aren't good for you, like we're talking to
Somebody
someone.
else.
Yeah. So where we can benefit a lot rather than white knuckling it saying, beat that voice and don't eat the Oreo, that neurobiologically is not the best strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The better strategy is to become equipped at even visualizing and understanding that the dialogue is going on.
Right.
So when I say to you, and I'm sure you've heard this in your life, if you've probably said this to yourself or other people, have you ever used the euphemism, "Man, I'm really in my own head"? You ever said
Yep.
that?
Sure.
So have you ever been in your
I've
own
heard
head?
it. I'm not I know what you're talking about, though.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, if I said to you, "Man, that person's really in their own head," is that typically a positive or a negative thing?
It's kind of a negative. It's got a negative connotation. They're they're
Right?
they're sitting there running hamsters running around in
Right.
circles.
So when you're in your own head, usually two things are happening. You are either vehemently agreeing with yourself, hey, that person's a jerk. Yes, and they did this, and here's why. And we have this narrative where there's this agreement about our own thinking, or
Mm-hmm.
you're violently disagreeing with yourself. Why do you do that? You've done
Mm-hmm.
that before. I can't believe you ate that Oreo. What kind of idiot are you? And so when we practice, there's a skill that we call metacognition, which is learning to think about how you think. What could be really fruitful is to what if you would step back and go, whoa, look at me desire an Oreo. How interesting. I wonder where that comes from. Because I'll give you a couple cute little neuroscience sayings. Number one, and a lot of people will know this, if you can name it, you can tame it.
Mm-hmm. I've
And
heard
then
that.
the other one comes from Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist. But Carl Jung had this saying, he said, what you resist persists.
Mm.
So I tell people, and forgive me for the analogy if people don't like the game of golf, but you don't need to play golf to get this. But if you're playing a game of golf and you're standing on a tee box and you're hitting over a lake and your brain goes, don't hit it in the lake, don't hit it in the lake, don't hit it in the lake. Let me ask you, where's the ball going?
Totally in the lake.
Right. Because what we resist persists.
Yeah.
Subsequently, if you sit around, Josh, and go, don't eat that Oreo, don't eat that Oreo, don't eat that Oreo, you will be covered in Oreo dust in about a half an hour.
Totally. It's about 45 minutes usually, but yeah, no, I'm with you.
So what if we rather stepped back and said, whoa, how interesting. Look at me desire, saturated fat and sugar and chocolate. Like, isn't that interesting? Rather than develop a don't or a resistance or even a judgment, we observe the conversation, because if you can name it, you can tame it. Wow, I see that happening. Because
Yep.
when you can get there, basically what your brain does is it offers you options.
Mm-hmm.
If you say don't eat it, you're going to hit it in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And if you capitulate to it, you're going to eat it anyway. But rather, what if we could get really good at noticing the inner dialogue? Because if you can become great at the noticer,
Mm-hmm.
life can really begin to offer you a lot
Starts
of
to
really
lose
cool
it
things.
loses its teeth a bit. It
Yeah.
loses its ability to get you.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's good stuff. That was actually a question that I intended to ask you, was a tool that you use, but so thank you for that. What, and I want you to take this wherever you want. I want your first take on it. What do you see as the opportunity in the market today?
When you say the market, do you mean like
What do you
just
see?
general business, our economy, our culture?
From your perspective, what do you see as the opportunity? If I was to say, Steve, what do you see as the biggest opportunity right now? Whether it's with coaching, whether it's with your customers, whether it's neuroscience and its integration with something else, and what do you see as the thing that gets you excited?
The biggest opportunity. I think there's a wide open field for more and more people to practice a level of self awareness.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think self-awareness as a topic, and it's a very broad topic, but that very thing that you and I were talking about, like, I know I sound like John Lennon when I say this, but I want you to imagine a world where people would step back and examine their own thinking.
Oh my gosh. If we
What what would happen? What would
introspection,
happen to the political realm if that happened? What would happen
totally.
in real estate? What would happen to? So when you say generally, I think there's a great opportunity for that to happen, and I'm seeing more and more people get into it. And I think as we grow in that, to be honest with you, it's my hope for humanity that we would continue to grow in self awareness.
Introspection is one of the things that has died a slow death as narcissism has become the rule of the day. I think the end result of the participation trophy culture is a bunch of narcissists running around because their faults are never pointed out. They're never brought to the forefront. I think that, as much as it may hurt your feelings to get told you're the stinky kid in school, your relationship that begins with deodorant at that point tends to uplift the rest of the world and you going forward, right? And so, the idea that we've told everybody that you're great, everything is perfect the way you are, takes and turns off that, well, wait a second, maybe the problem is me. And that looking to the inside. And it seems to be a kind of a persistent problem because people have so much of a harder time, it seems, establishing relationships because if you've never really considered all the flaws you bring to the table that other people put up with, you tend to be less willing to accept theirs. And, like I'm always amazed that people put up with me at all. I'm coming at it from the other standpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that I think I want to really agree with you on that. I
Yeah.
think it's
Well,
something that,
my coach asked me a question one time, and this was years ago. I'm still wrestling with it because he was actually working with me on the concept of transparency and vulnerability. They're two things, right? Transparency,
Mhm.
I suspect, is me telling you something you don't know unless I told you.
Okay,
Hey, no, I'm just saying that would be if I was like, hey, I'm
sure.
really struggling with one of the how I communicate with my kids or whatever. Well, you didn't know that. That's me being transparent. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is mostly my willingness to hear about me.
Hmm.
So when Jack was helping me with that, maybe if people wanted to practice this level of metacognition and thinking, here's a question, and maybe you and I could practice it. And the question goes like this: what's it like to be around me?
Okay.
Right? What's it really like to be around me? But I think a lot of people might freak out and that might be a jarring question, but what if I didn't think of it as it had to be judgmental? Like what if I could just learn?
Yeah, just an assessment. Totally. That I think, Steve, that is the secret sauce of this whole thing. To take and look at yourself like a good boss would, to try to take and set the employee up for success. Like, all right, what kind of person is this? What are they strong at? What are they weak at? All right, these are the areas they're weak. How do I set things up to bolster them where they're weak? How do I help them play to their strengths? Like, without the judgment, with literally, how do we just take and deal with what the situation is and get the best and make the most out of it? I think that there's a lot to that. I mean, at least I hope so, because I've been talking about it for quite a while. So it seems like a different sides of the same coin that we're talking about here.
Yeah. And we don't need to, we don't need to be offended. I have another mentor. Some people might know of him, Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest in New Mexico, and he has
Hmm.
this thing. I'm just kind of dovetailing off what you said, but he said, anytime you feel offended, the only part of you that can feel offense is your false self.
Hmm.
Your true self can't ever be offended. Here's why. If I say to you, Josh, dude, I don't like you, and I don't like what you say, and whatever, and etc. Well, two things can happen. Number one, if what I tell you isn't really about you, most of the time that's about me.
Sure.
Why would you feel offended even if I say certain things? But if I say something to you that's meaningful and true, well, then maybe you look at it as an opportunity to grow.
Sure.
So it's either not true, in which case there's no reason for you to feel offense, or it is true and there's an opportunity for you to grow. And,
Absolutely.
and so again, what if the world didn't feel offended ever, but and again, it
Wouldn't that
doesn't mean people don't say dumb things and
sure.
offend, but think about that. It's not true, and therefore there's no reason for me
Why
to
do I
feel
care?
offense.
Yeah,
Or it is true, and what do I learn?
absolutely. No, the idea that you're stuck with you and taking and figuring out how to take and get a better you out of you. Well, that's what the criticism helps you to do. It helps you to see the flaws and identify and move forward.
And I wonder if all the people that come and listen to you, I know you speak in the real estate community a great deal, and you have a huge following. Imagine them taking these concepts to their sales world,
Sure.
right? This is the kind of stuff in emotional intelligence that once you change this about your mind, then you and I have to spend less time going, you got to do this and you got to do that, and you got to do this. Because when people come to me and go, I want high accountability, I'm like, well, that's because you haven't figured something else about you out. You don't need high accountability. You need to figure something out about you. So let me help you figure that out about you. Because once you've figured that out, I'm not going to be holding your hand to go do some of the fundamental things that you already know you need to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to give folks an opportunity to get to know you a little better, Steve. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, a little more lightning roundish, sort of just kind of get your first take on them. What would you say you're most proud of in business that you've accomplished?
Oh, I would say starting Rewire at a time when it was very challenging me to do so, and actually running the company for the last really 12 years. Anytime you're in an organization, any organization that lasts for more than a year is already doing pretty good. But
Yeah, you're
we've been
ahead
at it
of the
for quite a
statistics.
bit. We're a profitable company, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Oh, that is something to be proud of. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Similar question. What are you most proud of in life that you've accomplished?
Mm. Well, I've got 4 kids and 2 grandkids. I've
Six
been
human
married. I've
beings.
been married for 30, going on 30. It'll be 34 years, and so I'm pretty proud of the fact that I could talk a human into staying around me for that long.
That is a good job of sales. And I am in sales, and there you go. You,
you have
you have
no
sold.
you have no
You have
idea. She can
sold.
probably hear me at some level. She's going, "You have no idea." I love my wife dearly, and I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to do what we've done and continue
That's
to grow.
awesome. That's awesome. What one piece of advice would you give our listeners?
I love these. You didn't prep me for that, so you're really getting the lightning thing, right?
This is exactly what I want, man. The thing that's on your mind right now.
Well, I'll just stay, and it'll sound thematic. Don't believe everything you think.
All right. That seems like some very cool advice. That's very cool advice. What one book would you recommend?
Well, my first answer to that is the one that's going to nurture your heart and soul at the time.
Okay. So no one
So,
book in particular.
well, I could probably give one, but every time I recommend a book, again, awareness, right? Just because I'm into that book doesn't necessarily mean the whole world's into it.
Sure.
If you're into neuroscience, if you're into how it applies to business, I think the book. I'm going to break the rules. I'll give you 2.
No worries.
The first book would be Dr. Daniel Siegel, who was the head of neurobiology at UCLA, Harvard trained guy, really, really brilliant and wonderful human being. He wrote a book called Mind Sight. So
Okay.
his 9 integrations in Mind Sight are timeless and incredible. And so Mind Sight by Dr. Daniel Siegel. And then secondly, I would say Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy, again, Harvard trained scientists, always Harvard, right? I don't know why, but they wrote a book called Immunity to Change in
Mm,
2010.
okay.
And I think, though, their immunity maps and how they get people to think technically and adaptively and help us really understand what they call competing commitments. There's
Hmm.
some work in that book that is, I don't know why that book isn't on everybody's shelf. Immunity to Change. If you're a leader, Immunity to Change is just
Love it.
phenomenal.
All right. Favorite movie of all time.
Groundhog Day.
Great film. Great film. Bill
Yeah.
Murray at his best. Good
Yeah.
movie.
I think they thought to plagiarize the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes in that movie, right? Everything is useless until, if you think about it, silly as it was, he was a jerk and he needed to learn how to not be a jerk. And it took him the entire movie until he wasn't trying to get the girl and do something stupid. When he actually genuinely cared for a human being, then the world let him move on.
He got away from vanity, vanity, alas, all is vanity. Absolutely.
Right? They
Yes, sir.
plagiarized Ecclesiastes, but I'm sure there are other movies. Maybe some of your listeners
If
aren't
you've
tuned
never
out.
seen, and actually the guy makes very thoughtful, and he's got quite a broad array of movies. Have you ever see the movie A Simple Twist of Fate? It is actually Steve Martin's redo on Silas Marner.
Huh?
So
I've not seen it.
it is obscure, but Steve Martin is good, and he does a very good job in the film. So Steve Martin is actually quite a bit of a renaissance man. He's a man of many talents, but
Yeah, great
uh,
banjo player, that's for sure.
yeah, no, he was a magician, comedian. I mean, he's did a bunch of stuff. What famous person in history would you want to meet if you could?
Um, Golly, I would. Yeah, I'm nothing that original here. The thing that came to the top of my head right when you said it was probably Abraham Lincoln.
All right,
I
good
think
stuff.
what
Interesting
the
guy.
adversity that he had to go through the bloodiest war in U.S. history, and then when it was done, unite people. That probably took a
Oh
special
yeah,
character, and what he had to go through to do that, and how he did it. And again, every time I'm in Washington D.C., I beg anyone that's in D.C. You always go to the Lincoln Memorial, turn to the left and read the Gettysburg Address, and turn to the right and read the second inaugural speech, and your life should change.
yeah. No, Lincoln was some guy,
Yeah.
the right person at the right time. They gave us, and that's an amazing, amazing thing. What person from your past would you want to sit down with and have lunch with today if you could?
Meaning they've passed.
Not necessarily that they're not with us anymore, but from your past. So they could be somebody that's not here anymore, or somebody that you just, you know. I mean, I've had people say a third grade teacher or something like that, or some people it's a family member that's no longer around. Somebody that I'd like to see where they are.
Yeah. That's a really good question.
I'm not going to lie, Steve. I shoot for really good questions.
Well, I I never ever met um, my paternal grandparents.
Hmm.
But
Me either.
my maternal grandparents were from Italy,
Hmm.
and my grandmother never spoke a lick of English. And in 1989, I moved, and I never understood her. And in
Hmm.
1989, I moved to Italy and lived there for 3.5 years, and ended up translating. And my wife is from Italy, and so
Nice.
we don't even speak a lot of English in our house, and haven't for 30 some odd years. And so I think it would be really interesting. Before my mom passed away, I was able to come back and be with her, and she spoke Italian, although very archaic Italian. It would be so cool to sit down and speak Italian with my maternal grandmother, because I didn't speak the language back then.
I love it. You know what? I mean, I have a German customer, and he speaks Italian and he loves it. Like he of all the languages, like he rips on every other language, but he loves Italian, the musicality of it, the sense of it. It is a beautiful language. And for the first time last year, I was able to get my mother and me to Italy. And it's just a great country, great people, very fun, happy, good, generous, nice place. All right. So if you go back and give yourself one piece of advice as a younger guy, what would it be? A younger version of you, what one piece of advice?
I have been asked that recently, and the reason I balked at the answer is because, if you remember what I told you about a developed prefrontal cortex, well, if I
Sure.
go back and start to talk about don't believe everything you think, or practice metacognition, or some of these things, I actually don't I actually don't know that my younger self would have understood it anyway. So it's
Sure.
almost like a crazy question to ask, because even if I doled out like this or that, like, God, like when you're young, you're being young. But if we could get past that, I would say much more inner grace.
Mm,
There is, like you said, there is narcissism and people that I think the much bigger problem is inner critic. And we're not good enough. And we're not good enough. I think that
yeah,
is,
there's a lot of that
we're
too.
not good enough is a far bigger problem than we're too good.
Yeah. No,
And
I
so
think
I never felt good enough. And I probably would have put my arm around me and kind of done a, you're
I
okay.
agree. I agree with what you're saying, and I mean the thing that always surprises me is the people that have both things going on simultaneously, and how they handle that dissonance in their head without their head going.
Well, if you're, I wouldn't you guess that narcissism might have its roots in I wasn't good enough, and so that's an
Oh,
overswinging of the pendulum.
yeah, no, totally, totally. The two things probably can play off of each other, no problem.
Probably.
Yeah, no, I could see that. So, Steve, if you had to be stuck in a foxhole taking fire with someone, who would you want in that foxhole with you? Who's watching your back?
Oh, well, am I going to die? Because it'd be my wife. I want her. Who's got my back? Uh,
Well,
Gosh,
the wife is always a safe one
well,
to
I don't
go
want her
with.
to die.
This
Who's
is
got my
true. I get
back? I'm in a foxhole, so they have to be able to fire a gun and stuff. Right? I don't know.
that.
Let's see. If I'm in a foxhole, who's got my back? I might. All four of my kids would, but if I was a foxhole, it'd be my both my sons. I think both my sons have my back.
Awesome. Love it. It's good to it always makes me sad when people don't have somebody for this. They have to go to a movie character or something like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, it's good to have people in your life that I can turn my back all day long. They got me covered.
Yeah, I
It's
feel
so
like I know
important.
you. I feel like you're going to get my back. And my next one, I'm going to say,
I wouldn't leave you hanging in
Josh
the wind,
Cadillac.
Steve.
Come on, man.
Would not leave you hanging in the wind, man. So Steve, what do you do to unwind?
Well, number one, you might imagine this. I practice a great deal of meditation, but beyond that, I love to play racquetball. I am a runner. I don't run as much anymore, but I ran 15 marathons, and
Hmm.
running for me was a way of meditation, and so I ran a great deal. I love the game of golf, which is kind of funny because if you saw me play, it's weird to watch someone who's probably not that good at something to love it that much.
Hmm.
But I love what golf teaches me about me. I love to hike. I love to be outdoors. I love to do about anything outdoors with my family. My wife and I hike a lot now, and right now we're raising a puppy, uh,
What kind of puppy?
a Rhodesian Ridgeback.
Ah, good stuff.
Yeah,
No, I have an English bulldog, which
there.
is it's if a pig and a dog, you know.
I wasn't going to say that. Yeah, those are crazy animals. They
Oh
don't
no,
have very
he's
long lifespans, sadly.
they
My
do
understanding.
not, but he is the joy of my life. I came
Yeah.
home yesterday and he is just so happy to see dad and bouncing around. And I mean, considering how careful he is with the little amount of energy that he has all day, to have used so much when I got home must mean I'm really important in his world.
Well, that's more bumper sticker logic, right? Try to see everybody in the world the way your dog sees you, right? Like
Yeah. No,
just
I just read something the other day that when your dog is dreaming, they're dreaming of you because 90% of their memories are of you. So your dog is
running
landing.
and yanking. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So Steve, you're an entrepreneur. You're out there. You're doing. It's been my experience that typically entrepreneurs they always have a next thing rolling around in the back of their head, the next project, the next book, the next idea, the next thing. What's the next thing for you?
Yeah, I think the next thing is still within the confines of Rewire. I think the fun thing about neuroscience is it just continues to give. The more we understand about the human brain, the more there are avenues and different things. I think there's some really exciting ways that we're using AI.
Hmm.
And so we might be looking at that. Uh, I think all the research, I think I told you this before the show, there's a lot of research out there about employee engagement
Yep.
and and sadly the most of the research is the cost of employee disengagement, and so that's something that we've really been hooking into with regard to how do we get leaders and people to help their people be way more engaged in what they're doing, which brings us back to a lot of things that we were talking about. But I think the concept of employee engagement, probably a book somewhere about that as we look at the research and try to
Mm,
live that out in coaching and watch people become more engaged. So that's
yeah.
got me pretty fired up.
So taking the positive position on this instead of what it costs to not have it, what the world looks like with engaged employees, what it's like to go to work and be around engaged employees, what it's like to.
Yeah, and again, this might sound a little cynical, but it's just a little odd to look at the world even post pandemic. There's a lot of people that still haven't come back. There's just a really
Mentally.
strange thing going on in the world, and sadly, there's a lot of disengagement. But that's an opportunity, right?
Sure.
I think for the people that choose to step up and engage into this world, I think we could be going into a really wonderful season.
That's one of the crazy things. Like, if it's not broken, you're screwed because it can't get any better. But if it's broken, we can fix it, and if we can fix it, it can get better. And so I think that's an important idea for people that are kind of resistant to this. So, Steve, if people want more of what you've got, man, they want to see, they want to hear more. Where can folks find you?
Yeah, that's such a great question because all of us are doing our best to not be hard to find. But when the whole world tries hard not to be hard to find, it's hard to find people, right?
Totally true.
I'm not hard to find on LinkedIn. That seems to be the social media that we've kind of globbed onto. Our website is real easy, Rewire Inc. You got to get the Inc. I tried desperately to find Rewire. Last I looked, it was really owned by an electrical company in New Jersey, I think.
Hmm.
And I don't know
I
what
could
the
see
workings
that.
are. So rewireinc.com. I'm Steve at rewireinc.com. So LinkedIn, I just Google me. It's pretty easy to find us and what we do. And I think there's a lot of really cool stuff on our website. And if anyone's interested in knowing a little bit more about how we coach and how we do mindset coaching, there's a lot on our website about that. But Steve at rewireinc.com and Grow at Rewire Inc. I think is one of our marketing sites. And so I really appreciate you asking, and we love helping people. And if you are at a point where you're thinking, hey, mindset coaching might be the right thing for me, and you might be past the whole rah thing,
Yeah, yeah,
right? If
sure.
people are done with that and they don't need someone in their life to tell them to do this and do that, and they're really trying to understand a deeper level of what it means to go through transformation, we'd love to help.
Good stuff. Steve, thank you so much for your time, sir, and for sharing your wisdom with us.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me, and I wish you and your all your listeners well.
Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, thank you for your time, for hanging out with us. Mastermind is live on the Close for Life website, reminding you guys always there is never a good excuse not to know your shit. Till next time, guys.